The next time you crack open a beer at a bar or grab a Coke from a gas station, stop and think about how it physically got there. Because there's a real chance that both passed through the hands of the same family. A family from Chicago that pulls in around $40 billion a year, and that you've almost certainly never heard of. No stock ticker or a famous CEO, just an invisible empire sitting between you and half of what you drink. Let's get into the full story behind the $40 billion Reyes empire. Chapter 1. The Invisible Middleman of America. Let's start with the strangest thing about this family, which is that their entire business model is built on being invisible on purpose. The Reyes family runs a company called Reyes Holdings, and it does something most people never think about for even 1 second: distribution. They are the middlemen. They don't brew the beer, they don't own Coca-Cola, they don't flip the burgers. What they do is control the enormous invisible machinery that moves those products from the factory to the place where you actually buy them. And they do it at a scale that is genuinely hard to comprehend. Reyes Holdings is the single largest beer distributor in the entire United States, moving somewhere north of 270 million cases of beer every single year to more than 100,000 bars, restaurants, and stores. If you drank a beer this week, the odds are very real that it rode to you on a Reyes truck. But beer is just one leg of the stool. This same family also owns Martin Brower, which is the largest distributor to McDonald's on the planet. They supply something like 16,000 McDonald's locations worldwide with everything from the buns to the cups to the toys and the Happy Meals. And on top of that, they're one of the biggest Coca-Cola bottlers in America, producing and delivering Coke across huge stretches of the Midwest and the West Coast. Put it together and you've got one family, 3 separate empires, all sitting quietly in the middle of your daily life. They are the reason the shelves are full, and they've made themselves completely invisible while doing it. And here's the number that should stop you. All of that adds up to roughly $40 billion in annual sales, which makes Reyes Holdings the 6th largest privately held company in the entire United States. Bigger than companies you could name off the top of your head. And yet the family behind it has spent nearly 50 years making sure you never learned their name. So who are they? And how does a company get this enormous while staying this hidden? To answer that, we have to go back to a freezing February morning in 1976 and a beer distributor that cost less than a nice house. Chapter 2. 2 brothers and a $740,000 bet. On February 4th, 1976, in the small town of Spartanburg, South Carolina, in about 50-degree winter weather, 2 brothers named Chris and Jude Reyes bought a small distributorship for a beer brand called Schlitz. The price was $740,000. Now that's the origin of a $40 billion empire, so let's sit with how modest it actually was. This wasn't a tech company or a big inheritance. It was a regional beer route. Trucks, a warehouse, and the boring, unglamorous job of hauling cases of Schlitz to local bars and stores. Their father, Joseph Reyes, an electrical engineer, backed the 2 young brothers in the deal. And the family they came from was not some dynasty of wealth. Joseph and his wife Frances raised 9 children, and Chris and Jude were just the 2 who decided to bet on beer. They didn't invent a product. They didn't have a secret formula. They bought the least sexy part of the beverage business, getting the stuff from point A to point B. But here's what the Reyes brothers understood that most people miss, and it's the entire key to this story. In the beverage world, everybody obsesses over the brands, the flashy logos, the Super Bowl commercials, the beer itself. Almost nobody thinks about the pipes. But the pipes, the distribution network that physically moves millions of cases, is a business with a hidden superpower, and the brothers saw it early. They realized that if you could become the road that every brand has to travel on, you'd end up more powerful and more protected than any single brand could ever be. So they took that one little Schlitz route and started doing something relentless with it. A few years in, they expanded into Georgia. Then, by 1979, they made the move to Chicago, which became the beating heart of the whole operation. And then they just kept buying. And buying. And the reason their timing was so perfect comes down to a strange American law that almost nobody outside the industry understands. Speaking of the Reyes brothers betting everything on an idea nobody else could see, there's a program someone on our team has been curious about called the Billionaire Brain Wave. It's a simple 7-minute audio built around theta brainwave research, the deep focus brain state linked to where big creative ideas come from. You put on headphones once a day, usually with your morning coffee, and that's the whole routine. It's a one-time $39. It comes with bonus guides on money habits and investing basics, and there's a 90-day money-back guarantee. So testing it costs you nothing if it's not for you. If you're watching on your TV, pause and scan the QR code on screen with your phone camera, or tap the first link in the description. Now, back to the legal oddity that made all of that buying pay off. Chapter 3. The Law That Prints Their Money. Here's the piece of this puzzle that makes the entire Reyes empire make sense. And it's a genuine quirk of American history that basically guarantees middlemen like them get to exist. Go back to Prohibition, the era when America banned alcohol entirely in the 1920s. When Prohibition finally ended in 1933, lawmakers were terrified of going right back to the way things were before, where the big breweries owned the bars, controlled the prices, and pushed alcohol as aggressively as possible. So they built a wall into the law, and it's called the three-tier system. Here's how it works. The company that makes the alcohol is Tier 1. The store or bar that sells it to you is Tier 3. And by law, in most of the country, those two are not allowed to deal with each other directly. They are forced to go through a middleman in the middle. Tier 2, the distributor. The brewer legally cannot sell straight to the bar. They have to hand it off to a licensed distributor first. Think about what that actually means as a business. The government essentially wrote a law requiring that a middleman exist. If you own that middle tier, you're not fighting to be part of the transaction. You're legally mandated to be part of it. Every beer that Anheuser-Busch or Molson Coors or a tiny craft brewery wants to sell in your town has to ride through a distributor to get there. And the Reyes brothers looked at that guaranteed, legally protected position and thought, we want to own as much of that middle tier as humanly possible. So they went on an acquisition spree that has never really stopped, snapping up more than 130 separate beer distribution operations over the years, rolling up smaller distributors city by city, market by market. Every time they bought one, they controlled another stretch of the road that beer has to travel. That's how you go from one Schlitz route to moving 250 million cases a year. But beer was only the beginning, because the brothers were about to make a move into an empire built on a completely different product, one served under golden arches. Chapter 4. How they quietly took over McDonald's supply. In 1998, the Reyes family made the deal that transformed them from a regional beer powerhouse into a genuinely global operation. They acquired a company called Martin Brower. And Martin Brower had one very, very special customer. Martin Brower's relationship with McDonald's goes all the way back to the beginning. Back to Ray Kroc and essentially the first McDonald's restaurant in the 1950s. This is one of the deepest supplier relationships in the history of American business. And what Martin Brower does is act as the logistics backbone for the McDonald's system. They run the distribution centers that keep those restaurants stocked with everything they need to operate: the frozen patties, the buns, the fries, the cups, the napkins, the Happy Meal toys. When a McDonald's runs low on anything, it's this system that refills it precisely, on schedule, so the store never runs out of a Big Mac. Today, Martin Brower serves around 16,000 McDonald's locations across the globe, delivering hundreds of millions of cases of product a year. In fact, thanks to those Happy Meals, the Reyes family quietly became one of the largest toy distributors on Earth. And the Reyes brothers have said that McDonald's was personal for them. Like a lot of people, the brand takes them right back to their own childhood, and when the chance came to partner with it, they jumped. But make no mistake, it was also strategic genius. Because now they had two enormous, recession-resistant pillars: beer, which people buy in good times and bad, and McDonald's Supply, one of the most reliable food operations in human history. They pushed even deeper into food service for a stretch, at one point owning Reinhardt Food Service, one of the largest broadline food distributors in the country, before selling it off in 2019 for $2 billion to focus the empire. And they weren't done stacking pillars. In 2015, they moved into the Coca-Cola system, and then went on a tear-acquiring Coke bottling and distribution territories across the Midwest and the entire West Coast. taking on a single deal that included over 7,000 employees and a stunning 170+ million cases a year. Beer, burgers, and Coke, three of the most consumed products in America, all flowing through one family's trucks. And with that kind of money rolling in, most families would start showing off. The Reyes family did the exact opposite, and that's where they get genuinely fascinating. Chapter 5. The Billionaires Who Refuse to Be Seen. Here's what makes the Reyes family so different from almost every other fortune of this size. They have poured enormous energy into staying completely out of the spotlight, and once you notice it, you can't unsee it. Chris and Jude Reyes are each worth somewhere in the neighborhood of $8 to $10 billion individually. That makes each of them richer than a lot of celebrities and tech founders whose faces you'd recognize instantly. But you don't know their faces. They don't do splashy television interviews. They're not posting on social media. They didn't slap their name on a stadium or a skyscraper for the world to gawk at. For years, they didn't even appear on the rich lists. And when they finally did show up on the Forbes 400, it was almost treated as news that these people existed at all. They run one of the largest private companies in the country from a headquarters in a quiet Chicago suburb, and they have deliberately kept the volume turned all the way down. The wealth is there if you know where to look. Chris has quietly bought a 44-acre spread in Aspen for nearly $50 million in a home in Florida, and Jude keeps a place in Palm Beach. But there are no reality shows, no tell-all interviews, no logo on the side of a building. The money moves as silently as the trucks do. And this connects directly to the biggest strategic decision the family has ever made, the one that ties this whole empire together. They have never taken the company public. No stock market, no ticker symbol, no outside shareholders. Now think about the money they've left on the table by doing that. A company this size going public could make the family staggeringly, instantly liquid. But going public means answering to Wall Street, filing your numbers for the entire world to dissect every 3 months, and letting outside investors have a say in how you run things. The Reyes family looked at that trade and said no thanks. By staying private, they answer to nobody but themselves. They don't have to reveal their profits. They can make quiet, patient, decade-long moves without a single analyst second-guessing them. Their privacy isn't just a personality trait. It's a business weapon. And it lets them keep the whole operation and the whole fortune locked inside the family. But an empire this powerful, sitting in the middle of everything, doesn't get to stay entirely without critics. And the complaints about how they operate are worth taking seriously. Chapter 6. The Complaints About the Giant in the Middle. Now, when you become the biggest middleman in an entire industry, you accumulate a lot of power over everyone forced to deal with you, and not everybody is thrilled about it. This is the part of the story the family definitely doesn't advertise. The loudest criticism comes from small craft brewers, and it gets right at the dark side of that 3-tier system. Remember, by law, a brewery often has to go through a distributor to reach bars and stores. Well, in 2022, a California craft brewery called Seismic Brewing filed a federal antitrust lawsuit against Reyes, and the allegations paint a picture of just how much leverage a giant distributor can hold. Seismic claimed that after Reyes bought up the smaller distributors that used to carry its beer, Reyes pressured them to sign a new contract with far fewer protections, and that when Seismic refused to sign what it called an anti-competitive deal, Reyes allegedly retaliated. According to the lawsuit, Reyes salespeople arranged what were described as bounties to push bars into pulling Seismic's beer off their tap handles, essentially punishing the little guy for not falling in line. Now, in fairness, these were allegations in a lawsuit, and Reyes has denied wrongdoing. But the case shined a bright light on a real fear in the industry, that when one middleman gets big enough, brewers and bars have nowhere else to turn. And it's not just brewers. The Teamsters Union, which represents thousands of Reyes workers, has publicly clashed with the company, at one point surveying retailers and claiming that changes Reyes made to its Coca-Cola distribution in Southern California disrupted service and cut some deliveries dramatically. The company has also faced its share of the lawsuits that come with employing tens of thousands of people, including a class action over the management of its employees' retirement plan. So it's the classic, both things are true situation. On one hand, this is a genuinely brilliant, disciplined, self-made family business that mastered one of the most important and overlooked functions in the entire economy. On the other hand, it's a giant that sits in a legally protected choke point, and the people who have to pass through that choke point don't always feel like they're being treated fairly. Both of those are real, and that tension leads straight into the biggest question hanging over the whole empire. What happens to it now? Chapter 7. Keeping it in the bloodline. Here's where the Reyes family reveals what they're really playing for, because the way they've handled the next generation tells you everything about their long game. This is not a company where the founders cashed out and handed the keys to outside executives. It's a deeply family-run operation, and the family is enormous and involved. Chris and Jude, the two founding brothers, moved into co-chairman roles overseeing the whole thing. But look at who's actually running the divisions. Their younger brother, known as Duke, stepped up as the CEO. Other brothers, James and Tom, are executives inside the beer division. This is a family that pulled multiple siblings into the business and built a leadership structure designed to keep control firmly in Reyes' hands across generations. When you don't have public shareholders, you don't have to hire a celebrity CEO to please Wall Street. You can promote from within your own family and think in terms of the next 50 years instead of the next quarter. And that patience shows up in how relentlessly they keep reinvesting instead of just pocketing the cash. Rather than sitting still, they keep pouring money back into the machine, building new distribution centers, launching a roughly $500 million Coca-Cola production campus in California, expanding into wine and spirits and non-alcoholic drinks, buying up more territory. A public company might feel pressure to return that money to shareholders. The Reyes family plows it back into extending their own empire, because every new warehouse and every new route is another piece of the road that they own. They're not trying to cash out, they're trying to build something that outlasts them, held by the family for as long as possible. Which brings us to the real lesson buried inside this whole invisible empire. Chapter 8. The Genius of Owning the Road. So step back and look at the entire thing, because once you connect the pieces, the Reyes family stops looking like lucky beer guys and starts looking like some of the sharpest business minds in the country. Here's the whole blueprint in one sentence. They figured out, decades before almost anyone else, that owning the road is more powerful than owning the destination. Everyone else was fighting to build the flashiest brand, the best beer, the coolest soda, the most famous restaurant. The Reyes brothers quietly went and bought the roads that all of those brands are forced to travel on. And roads, it turns out, are a phenomenal business. Brands rise and fall. A beer that's hot today can be forgotten in 10 years. But no matter which beer wins, it still has to ride a distributor's truck to get to the bar. No matter which McDonald's item is trending, it still has to move through a distribution center to reach the restaurant. By owning the middle, the Reyes family made themselves indispensable to everyone and vulnerable to almost no one. They don't care which brand you pick, they get paid either way, and they wrapped that genius insight in a fortress of privacy. No public stock, no famous faces, no bragging, so that they could compound their empire quietly, decade after decade, while the rest of us never even learned they were there. From two brothers and a $740,000 Schlitz route in 1976 to a $40 billion machine that touches your beer, your Coke, and your Big Mac, all held inside one family that answers to no one. The next time you're at a bar, or a drive-thru, or a checkout counter, just remember, there's an invisible family standing between you and half of what you're buying, quietly collecting a toll on the road. That's the Reyes Empire. You've been paying them your whole life and you never even knew their name. And that's a wrap of this video. If stories about the families and empires that quietly run America are what brought you here, subscribe to Global Status and we'll keep delivering them. See you in the next one.